Mercury. Mercury is the closest planet to the Sun, and that proximity makes it one of the most extreme places in the solar system. During the day, temperatures hit around 800 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt lead. But here's the thing. Mercury has basically no atmosphere, so when night comes, there's nothing to hold that heat in. Temperatures plummet to negative 290 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a swing of over 1,000 degrees between day and night. Without an atmosphere, you're also getting hit with the full force of solar radiation, no filter whatsoever. And those meteorites that burn up in Earth's atmosphere before they reach the ground? On Mercury, they slam straight into the surface at full speed. It's a place of brutal extremes with zero protection from anything the universe throws at it. Venus. Venus is basically hell if hell were a planet. The surface temperature sits around 900 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hot enough to melt lead into a puddle. You'd think being closer to the sun would explain that, but it's actually the atmosphere doing most of the work. The air on Venus is so thick with carbon dioxide that it traps heat like a planetary oven, and the pressure down there is about 90 times what you experience on Earth. That's the equivalent of being 3,000 feet underwater. If you somehow landed on Venus, you'd be crushed and cooked simultaneously. Oh, and the clouds aren't water vapor like ours. They're made of sulfuric acid, the stuff that eats through metal. Venus makes every other planet look comfortable by comparison. Mars. Mars has this reputation as the next frontier, but let's be clear about what you're actually dealing with. The atmospheric pressure there is about 1% of what we have on Earth, which means if you stepped outside without a suit, your blood would literally start to boil. Not because it's hot, but because liquids boil at lower temperatures when pressure drops. The average temperature sits around negative 80 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze carbon dioxide right out of the air. And here's the kicker. Mars lost its magnetic field billions of years ago, so there's nothing blocking the radiation that constantly slams into the surface. On Earth, our magnetic field deflects most of that stuff. On Mars, you're getting bombarded with solar radiation and cosmic rays nonstop. You'd need serious shielding just to survive a few hours exposed. Jupiter. Jupiter has no ground to land on. If you tried to descend through its atmosphere, you'd just keep falling through layers of hydrogen and helium gas getting denser and denser as you go. The radiation alone would kill you 1,000 times over before you got anywhere near the core. Winds in the upper atmosphere whip around at 400 miles per hour, tearing through clouds of ammonia and methane. As you sink deeper, the pressure climbs fast. The hydrogen around you stops acting like a gas and starts behaving more like a liquid metal. Eventually, the pressure gets so extreme that it doesn't just crush objects, it breaks them down past any recognizable structure, compressing matter to the atomic level. There's no solid surface waiting at the bottom, just more and more crushing force until nothing remains. Saturn. Saturn is another gas giant where there's absolutely nothing resembling a surface to stand on. If you somehow ended up falling into Saturn, you'd first hit the outer atmosphere where temperatures sit around negative 218 degrees Fahrenheit. The winds here scream at roughly 1,100 miles per hour near the equator, which would immediately start tearing you apart. As you kept falling, the atmosphere would get denser and hotter, the pressure building until your body was crushed completely. There's no solid ground waiting at any point, just gas that transitions into liquid hydrogen and helium as you go deeper. The planet is basically a massive ball of swirling gases with a possible rocky core buried so deep and under such extreme pressure and heat that nothing recognizable would exist by the time you got anywhere near it. Uranus. Uranus is basically an ice giant lying on its side, spinning sideways while every other planet spins more or less upright. The planet itself is freezing cold, with temperatures dropping to around negative 371 degrees Fahrenheit. If you somehow ended up there, the atmosphere would kill you pretty much instantly. It's mostly hydrogen and helium, with methane mixed in that gives the planet its blue-green color. That methane forms clouds in the upper atmosphere, and just being exposed to those conditions would freeze your body solid in seconds. As you fall deeper into Uranus, the atmospheric pressure increases dramatically, going from crushingly intense to absolutely catastrophic. The pressure would compress you long before you reached anything resembling a surface. There's no solid ground to land on anyway, just denser and denser layers of icy materials and gases getting more extreme the farther down you go. Neptune. Neptune is the coldest place in the solar system, with an atmosphere temperature of negative 373 degrees Fahrenheit. That's cold enough to freeze nitrogen solid, but the temperature is just the beginning of your problems. This planet has the fastest winds ever recorded anywhere, clocking in at 1,200 miles per hour. For reference, the worst hurricanes on Earth barely reach 200 miles per hour. If you somehow survived the initial entry and the winds didn't tear you apart immediately, you'd start falling through layers of hydrogen, helium, and methane gas. The deeper you go, the more the pressure builds. Like the other gas giants, there's no solid surface to land on. The atmospheric pressure just keeps increasing until it's strong enough to compress your body into nothing. You'd be crushed down to a dense point long before reaching whatever core might exist at the center. Pluto. Bonus. Pluto sits out there about 3.5 billion miles from the Sun, so far away that sunlight takes over 5 hours to reach it. The temperature hovers around negative 400 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough that the nitrogen in what little atmosphere exists just freezes and falls as snow onto the surface. Speaking of atmosphere, Pluto barely has one. It's so thin that you'd be exposed to cosmic radiation and solar wind essentially instantly, no protection whatsoever. The surface is covered in frozen nitrogen, methane, and carbon monoxide, all locked solid in massive plains and glaciers. If you somehow ended up there, you'd freeze solid in seconds while simultaneously getting bombarded by radiation. Pluto's so cold and distant that even basic chemistry barely functions. It's just a frozen rock drifting in the dark, about as hostile to life as you can imagine.